YouTubers, welcome back to AZ2 Ozarks. It is the very end of May and I owe you guys a garden update. So things are a little bit different in the garden this year. I don't have as much time to spend doing all the weeding that I would like to and all the maintenance, but we still have a pretty pride-worthy garden, I would think, for the end of May. I am working off farm now, and so I just don't have the same time to dedicate, but at the same time, when I get home in the evening, I do a little bit of pruning or weed pulling or something like that, and we just go from there. So we're hoping for the best this year. Let me start at one end of the garden, work you to the other end, and then we'll come back through the greenhouse on the way back. Starting over here at the end, I still have my fruit trees in pots and I really want to get them planted into the orchard, and that was kind of the plan for this spring, but time is just a very limited resource around here, as well as we have to build a complete fence in order to keep the goats out. So it just hasn't happened yet, but hopefully soon. And there's Tommy meowing all over the place. Next, I have corn, as well as a couple of the volunteer giant mammoth sunflowers. So the sunflowers kind of volunteered all throughout this area, and I pulled them up and tried to put them into a designated row down here to get out of the way of the corn. This is all sweet corn. I believe it is Country Gentleman variety. Actually, I take that back. It's Golden Bantam is the variety, which tends to be more insect resistant, which is good because we do all organic here, and I've had some substantial damage from corn worms in the past. I'm only growing sweet corn for our family this year in the chicken feed forest, which I will link to the other video on the chicken feed forest. I'm doing all grain corn. Next, here at this trellis, I have small beans that have started. And on one half, I have Chinese purple noodle beans, and then the far half, I have the Chinese green noodle beans. And I do the noodle beans because they're really long and have a great harvest. They're highly productive, and so those are the favorite ones that I like to have. I like to can them as well as freeze them for preserving. We still have a bit of a mulch pile going on here in the middle. I have radishes. I keep succession planting the radishes, so I keep getting more and more. Every week I start a new patch of more radishes to keep them going. Then we have a couple rows of, what happened to my lighting here? See if I can figure that out. I don't know, it got dark all of a sudden. Anyways, I have a couple rows of squash. So I have zucchini, as well as, I'm gonna stop the video. I don't know if that's any better. I can't tell what's going on with the lighting on this darn thing, but hopefully you can still see anyway. Here is a zucchini plant, and you can see immature zucchini forming already. And there are a lot of them. Now, the squash bugs have been out in full force already this year, and so daily I've been coming out here, turning over the leaves and squishing the squash bugs because they will immediately decimate these plants, as well as removing any eggs and popping them that I find on there. The eggs are little, I don't know, amber color. And so I have a bunch of these, and you can see the damage from the squash beetles here. And that's what they do to them, but then the whole plant will just kind of wither away and die, which I think is what happened to this plant here, though it could be a combination of a drought. We haven't had any rain in a while here, probably 2 weeks or more, and I have not had time to water at all, so we're just relying completely on nature here. I put a row of marigolds in between each row of the squash in the hopes that the marigolds would help deter the squash beetles. But unfortunately, my timing's off. The marigolds are not blooming yet. So I think it's really the flowers that keep the squash bugs away. So another little wilted plant. If this one doesn't perk up by morning, I'm going to harvest that zucchini, and we're just gonna eat that little guy the way it is. See, it's not very big, but I don't know if that plant's going to make it or not. Now, I had used mulch from my mulch pile over there. in the rows where I was going to plant here. And in this row, tomatoes from the mulch pile came up, but not the marigolds that I had actually planted. And then here I had a whole row of rampicante squash, which is an Italian type of a zucchini, but it's kind of a long shape with kind of a hook at the end. Really cool and very tasty. I had zero germination. I even tried some in pots, zero germination. More marigolds, and then here we have our yellow squash. And let's see, there's some little yellow crookneck summer squash getting started. Right here in my walkway, I have some mizuna, which is an oriental green. I harvested that for dinner tonight. I have a whole row of nasturtium, and these are a flowering plant, but both the leaves and the flowers are edible. Unfortunately, I don't have flowers to show you yet, but it's kind of like a floral yet peppery taste to the greens, and they're interesting. They add some intrigue to a salad. And then down here, I have more radishes. So these ones are starting to bolt, which I'm allowing them to because I want to harvest seeds to plant more radishes in the future, so I need those. I have a bunch more cilantro planted here, so this is a more recent stage of cilantro. I've been, same thing, succession planting the cilantro. Coming around the other way, we have some lettuce, and this one is rouge de Hiver, which is French for red of winter. And that one has been doing really well, and now I'm switching out to a Merlot variety, which is supposed to be a little more heat tolerant. So in this area, I had all kinds of lettuce, and I've just been harvesting it and replanting. I try to extend the harvest as well as possible that way. Here's a pretty one. And you can see how pretty that Merlot is. Very nice. I think this might be more rouge de Hiver, or it might be the Marvel of Four Seasons. I'm not sure because I just keep planting. Here we have a blueberry plant, and you can see there's one little ripe blueberry on there. So there's not going to be a huge harvest this year, but it's something. It's a good start. Hopefully in the future we'll have a lot more blueberry plants. I started cucumbers along this trellis, and only 2 plants are still surviving, so I'm going to have to plant more. I don't know if it's the drought or what. And then here we have Nero kale, which is like your dinosaur kale. And you can see that the cabbage worms have really been a problem. They're putting holes all in it. But this is a good seller at the farmer's market, as well as the rainbow chard. And then this is another kale. This one is the Russian red kale. And this one doesn't seem to be enjoyed as much by the cabbage worms. So that's good news. I have some oriental greens going to bolt here, which I believe is the mizuna. And that one is tatsoi. I have more lettuce. This is the Marvel of Four Seasons. It's really beautiful lettuce. And it's, you can see, getting ready to bolt here. It's about to flower. So I've got to harvest those. And they've also been selling really well at the market. Right here I have a lonesome turnip that I allowed to go to seed because I want to grow more turnips in the fall. Keep working our way down here. This right here was what was called corn salad, which was my champion of the winter. And now it's just a stick with dried flowers. I've been spreading these seeds everywhere. And so the idea is that you spread the seeds everywhere, and then in the winter you'll have little corn salad plants all over the place. And they are great for eating salads. And they survived all of our freezing temperatures without protection at all. I have a couple volunteer amaranth plants, which are devoured by what I think was the flea beetles. But that's okay, because I didn't really want to grow them this year. I have some spinach, but most of the spinach is bolting really quickly. It's just going to seed. Here I have what I call my carrot forest. So last year I had a couple carrots here that I didn't harvest, and before I could get to them, they went to flower and seed and just spread everywhere. And you can see there are carrots everywhere. And same thing with the amaranth. You can see them interspersed. I did not plant those this year. They're just from seeds last year. I also have a volunteer sunflower, which is fine. I really like those. I have sage that overwintered, and it's flowering beautiful purple flowers. And so I was impressed. 2 out of 3 of the sage survived the whole winter. I have some cabbage plants and more cabbage worms. Totally dissatisfied with those. And I have some volunteer tomatillos. These ones are the purple variety, and you can see they're already in flowers. I'm looking forward to a much bigger tomatillo harvest this year than I got last year. A couple more of the cabbage plants. And then I have a beet row here. And these were planted very early in the spring. And you can see they're starting to get nice little beet roots on them. I love beet greens even more than I like beets, but they are a good market seller, so that's why I am growing them. We have a whole row of garden peas, and so these are shelling peas, and they have lots of pods on them, but they are not yet filling out. See if we can get focus. I'm unhappy with my camera today. So you can see they're still narrow, they haven't filled out. Here is where I intentionally planted carrots. I have different varieties of carrots planted in rows, and then more volunteer tomatillos. Here I just recently planted okra, and there's our itty bitty okra right here. Just getting started, because that's a heat-loving plant. It does not like the cold at all. So I have one row there. I have some interspersed turnips, and then I have another row of okra here. And I have beautiful Chinese cabbage. We actually just enjoyed a head of that the other night with our dinner. So more down there at the end. I have some regular cabbage and broccoli and sweet potatoes. So the cabbage and broccoli will be coming out very soon, and then the sweet potatoes will vine and take over this whole area. It's very loose soil over here, and so I like it for my sweet potatoes, and they will just take over like mad. Most of the broccoli I have harvested. Actually, my son harvested it, and we had really nice heads on here. I didn't take the plants down because they can have offshoots like this, where they get like secondary little shoots everywhere, and then you can still eat those. Here we have the elephant garlic, which was planted last summer. I was just gonna say it hadn't scaped yet, but look at this. There's a scape. I'll have to look closely and see if we have more. So one of the fellow vendors at the farmer's market had a bunch of scapes on his music garlic this week, and he gave me a bag full of the scapes, which was really cool. So we had some of those, I think 2 nights ago for dinner. Oh yeah, I need to come out here and harvest all these scapes. They're so good. You just fry them up in some butter, like pan fry them, and they're super yummy. Over here, I have artichokes, which last year my artichokes never even got this big by the end of the season. So they're not as big as I would like them to be, the plants. Obviously there's no artichokes happening yet, but they're way bigger than they were last year. I think this one here is bigger than any of them got last year. So I've got a few of those guys going on. I had, this is a different variety of broccoli. It was like a broccolini. And so we'll see if we get anything off of those still. I planted watermelons here in the middle because they will just take over the whole area. And then cantaloupes here. Same thing, the vining plants will just go crazy. If you want a quick glimpse at the chicken feed forest between the weeds, that is the corn. and the corn is really doing nicely. That's the glass gem grain corn. Then into the greenhouse. Over here I have my small hot peppers getting started. Down the whole center row is where I do my tomatoes, because then I can string them up on from the ceiling of the greenhouse. So these all need pruning and stringing up. I have some kohlrabi that's about ready for harvest. There's the green kind and there's the purple kind. Here I have some micro tomatoes. These are, I want to say they're orange hat tomatoes, and so the whole plant won't get more than 8 inches high, but it's supposed to be a prolific producer of little orange tomatoes that are cherry size, and you can see it's already got a little tomato on there. So I planted a whole bunch of these little micro tomatoes because I thought they would be cute on the sides, because then I don't have to string them up. Interspersed between the tomatoes, I have cilantro planted. I'm hoping to be making salsa in the near future. So a bunch of these little guys. And then here I have more tomatillos. So these are the tomatillos I actually planted. And I planted yellow, green, and purple tomatillos for different flavors to make some enchilada sauces, salsa verde, and different salsas with them. I do have some nasturtium mixed in here. These ones are less happy, but this one did have a flower. It's not very pretty to show right now because it's wilty. On the far side, it's hard to see, but that's where all my hot peppers are, on the far side. I do have some marigolds interspersed in here. Again, they're not just for beauty, but also for insect control, hopefully. I had a volunteer kale. Here is my cilantro that bolted, and I've been harvesting off of that for several weeks, and it's been just wonderful, delicious stuff. This row is kind of been where I've had things that overwintered, like my greens, and so I've just started harvesting them and just started planting in other things like herbs that are going in. I think that's rosemary, these little tiny guys. And I honestly can't remember what that is. It might be rhubarb. Post in the comments if you know. This was a Chinese cabbage, and I'm letting it dry out so I can get all the seeds out of it. I have some roselle hibiscus, so that's for making delicious tea. Those will get huge and have a trunk like a tree by the end of the season. I do have a volunteer watermelon in here, and I was just letting it go. I don't know, we'll see if it gets too out of control. And then here's a really late arrival. I planted this a long time ago, and it never came up until just recently, but it's a mustard green. I think it's a Komatsuna mustard green. My beets overwintered. And the root is no good for eating. Let's see where the root is. Because it's big and gnarly and tough. But these greens it's been putting on for the whole winter. And I just keep picking them off, and it keeps putting on more. So that's been a great treat. Here is a volunteer perilla mint. And while it is harmful to the cattle, I can have it here in the greenhouse. I intend to make some minty tea out of it. These guys are quite the novelty. These are Egyptian walking onions, if you've ever heard of those. So at the base, we have big bulbs in there. But they make these big onions, and then they push off into these little mini bulbs. And they'll droop down to the ground, and then they walk, because these droop down and start a new plant. Or you can bust them off and plant them wherever you want to. And I have some that are even doing a flower thing, which is pretty cool. So a neighbor had actually given me these last year, and I threw them in here, and they overwintered and look great. I have some tomatillo plants, and they do have little tiny fruits on them. These were overwintered inside the house because they don't like under 40 degrees temperature. So I'm hoping they do something. They're not the most lush, beautiful tree because I think the winter was rough on them being inside, but we'll see. Friend from the farmer's market gave me this tray of turmeric, so I've got to find a home to put all of them. I've got to spread them out, and then it's their rhizome under the soil that will grow and that you harvest and eat later on. And I use a lot of turmeric, so I was pretty excited about this. It was quite the gift. Over here I have sweet peppers. I think these are Pippin's honey pepper, and they're a really cool variety I haven't grown before, but they put on different colorful peppers, and they're shaped kind of like a jalapeno, but they're a sweet pepper like a bell pepper, and of course cilantro interspersed everywhere. And then down this row, as we go down, I have 3 different colors of bell peppers as well. I can't tell you which is which because that's just how I roll. I start planting stuff and I go crazy like that. So we will eventually have lots of peppers. This year, peppers are much earlier and looking better than they did last year. So some success, some failure, but overall I say it's a win for us. Had some little flowers my daughter planted over here. So those will be pretty, hopefully. Okay. Back here I have some strawberries in pots and blackberries. And these guys took a turn for the worse over the last few days. And I don't know if something like affected them, a disease or something, or if it's just plain the drought, which is more likely. Except the potatoes are looking marvelous. And I noticed today that we actually have some flowers getting started. So that's an indicator that we're getting close to a potato harvest here. And they're in grow bags. I started them quite some time ago in the bottom of the bags, and I kept putting dirt until the bags were full. And now the plants are way out the top. Last year I had almost 0 harvest of potatoes. So poor that I actually planted more than I harvested. So this is looking much more exciting this year. Then I think we're just about ready to wrap it up. I'm going to cruise around here, show you a couple more strawberries on this side. Here we are in little pots. Ultimately, I hope to move the strawberries into the orchard area, and I hope to have a perennial garden with the orchard, and so I'll have berries and all that good stuff in there. So that is the late May, almost June garden update. Lots going on out here, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to keep following our adventure.